The UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf is already embroiled in mitigating disputes between United States and Russia and others. Russia has presented claims to extend its rights in the Arctic through an extended continental shelf. They see this literally in their backyard. Um, Russia has sought to further sovereignty claims to undersea Arctic territory, and it's unlikely to be the only such country going forward. And it's not hard to imagine deepening disputes between any number of combinations of Arctic countries over continental shelves and disputed territories as the Arctic geography changes. The the Arctic Council has its work has focused on largely on environmental monitoring, support for indigenous communities in the region, and emergency response. And typically, national security issues do not come up in the council, but the Arctic Council has recently created a new expert group on nuclear and radiological emergencies. And you may remember that the summer of 2019 saw two such emergencies in the Arctic when a nuclear-powered submarine caught fire outside the Kola Peninsula. And then six weeks later, a nuclear-powered cruise missile exploded while being recovered from a seabed in the White Sea. And so the nuclear radiological component, certainly of maritime domain awareness and emergency response, has already taken on a nuclear component as well.
I don't particularly see these two entities having much power or influence to mitigate potential conflicts in the region, mainly because, for one, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, I don't think it planned for an ice-free Arctic. I don't think anyone planned for that. And so I don't know if it comprehensively and adequately addresses the changing environment of the region and the problems that will arise with that. Additionally, the US has yet to ratify this convention, so it may feel that it can't be held accountable for its actions. And with the Arctic Council, it might be too soon to tell, but there is no enforcement mechanism with the Arctic Council. And I'm not sure if the Arctic Council has handled something of this scope and nature before in terms of a melting Arctic and what that means for how countries are going to operate in it. So the Council may not be prepared to handle conflicts that can arise as more countries kind of move into this region. If tensions were to rise between the US and Russia, for instance, and considering that they're both members of the Arctic Council, will it really be able to mitigate any conflicts or to provide solutions? I'm not sure. So in that sense, I don't know how effective that those two entities will be.
Do you think that they will try to increase this role as you can say the Arctic gets congested with other states? But this all depends on those states and their interests and their willingness to cooperate with these actual entities. What kind of power does the Arctic Council really have to actually push a state to do or not do what they want to? And I can see that it's gonna be a big conflict.
One of the problems about the UNCLOS is, of course, the US refuses to ratify it. So it becomes very difficult when the US then leans on UNCLOS, as it is in the South China Sea, to say to China, you can't claim this. This is high seas. I have freedom of navigation. Freedom of navigation exists because of the UNCLOS. So this sort of slightly hypocritical double view that the US has of these international treaties, more so, I would say, perhaps under the current administration, is not helping. It's rather like the CTBT. If the US were to ratify it, it would be much easier for everyone else to adhere to it. So I think it's going to be really challenging, and the US needs to see a balance of value for them in ratifying UNCLOS and putting the full force of its enforced nature, because that is the only agreement that's going to play in this game. And so I think that the big problem is in asserting that they want the things that are in UNCLOS to work, but then not supporting it in another way. How is this going to affect global nuclear order will largely depend on what the global nuclear order itself looks like in 20, 30 years' time. If it's much as it looks like now, then I think this is just going to be another destabilizer.
To the degree that an opening Arctic contributes to conflict or disputes between nuclear powers, and most of the nuclear powers have interests in the Arctic, then that obviously puts pressure on the fabric of the nuclear order. Civilian and military applications of nuclear capabilities, such as nuclear powered icebreakers that Russia has long invested in. And now China is entering that game. These may have downstream effects on the nuclear order as well. In the larger geopolitical sense, really we're seeing the emergence of China on the world stage in practically every fora that used to be the domains of United States, Russia, Europe, and others.
We can already see that Russia is increasing its activities in the region, especially its military activities. And as that occurs, the US may see that as Russia starting to cut ahead of the US, and it may perceive that there's a change in global nuclear orders and that it's, Russia's ahead, it's become a global superpower, whatever. So with that perceived change in global nuclear order, then I can see that affecting how the US acts.
I don't see anything positive about the relationships between the US, Russia, and China coming out of the opening of an Arctic sea route. It is going to be another vehicle for competition and conflict.